Okay, welcome back to Beyond the Loss. Again, I am joined by Danyelle Kaluski, who is the Center Vice Chair and Director of Operations. I am Aditi Leverage, the founder of the Pregnancy and Infant Loss Support Center. Over the last 3 weeks, it's been Danyelle and I having chats because we have really good chats and we wanted to include all of you in some of our chats, and hopefully you find some value and some insights in the conversation. So today is our last recording before we break for the holidays. And so we thought it would be a good idea to chat a little bit about self-care through the holidays, not just self-care through COVID-19, which obviously is going to look a little bit different, but self-care when you're dealing with grief through the holidays. So thank you, Danyelle, again for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I think that this is a really important subject and a really key time for us to be talking about self-care through the holidays, because I know some of the items that some people might be used to using as self-care, could it be getting our hair done or the nails or the massages, are not available in some of the areas. I know here in Alberta, we are not able to even get a massage. So talking about self-care that we can do within the restrictions we have.
Yes, definitely. I had a really interesting conversation, and I have this conversation quite a bit with clients. When I was working as a social worker, which obviously the people that know me now, my role is no longer social worker, but when I was like a young, fresh, keen social worker, I was working primarily with people who were living with HIV. And as a young social worker, my first recommendation always was self-care. Right? So they come in and their whole lives have been just turned upside down. And I'm like, this is what I'm going to prescribe to you is self-care. And so they would leave the sessions, and then they would come back for their follow-up. And I was all like excited as this, fresh social worker. And I would say, so how did it go? I was all excited. How did it go? How was your self-care? And they're like, yeah, no, I didn't do it. And I was like, and I remember feeling really I don't know if frustrated was the right word, but kind of I didn't understand why they were not doing things for themselves that they knew were going to be beneficial to their journey. And I didn't understand it until I experienced loss. Then when I experienced loss, I went to a social worker, and there's nothing wrong with social workers. I'm not bashing social workers at all. They're lovely. But the first recommendation that particular social worker gave me was self-care. And I walked away, and do you think I did the self-care?
No, because I didn't. When I was prescribed by a therapist, I didn't do it.
Exactly. And so it really got me thinking about this notion of self-care, right? And I think this notion of self-care has really become a consumeristic idea. That self-care is getting haircuts, getting massages, having bubble baths, right? Don't get me wrong, I have so many bubble baths, right? But some people are just don't have the capacity, are not in the space. Now with COVID-19, those things are literally unavailable to us, and they're oftentimes unavailable to people for different reasons. And I don't believe that that's what self-care is, right? So I really started to think about this, and I had a conversation earlier this week with a couple of my clients heading into the holidays. For me, I believe self-care is a point in which we can get to, and I think that it is a valuable recommendation by psychologists, social workers, all of the people that support us in our journey. It is very beneficial. It's not always, though, attainable when we are in the throes of the grief. So I like to think of self-care as being here, and then we have to have building blocks for us to get there. And where we are in our current place, and I think where we all are in our grief and in COVID-19, we are in a space of self-preservation. And I think that there's a big difference between self-preservation and self-care. I know, Danyelle, you've probably heard of that like the self-care industry always talks about like, put your mask on, the oxygen mask theory, like, put your mask on before you put on others, right? But they sell that as self-care. That's not self-care. That's literally the difference between life and death.
Yeah.
It's literally survival. And that is what I believe, like, the difference is between self-preservation and self-care. Self-preservation is those things you do for yourself, literally to get through the day.
Yep.
Where self-care is those things that really make you feel nurtured. So like, I feel like there's a difference, and we're going to oscillate between the two throughout our lives and throughout our journeys, but it's really about understanding kind of where you are and what those activities look like for you. Because I think when we're in self-preservation, we often feel really guilty for being there.
In my experience, I totally felt guilty for being in self-preservation, and then felt guilty because I wasn't doing, quote, self-care. Because for me, when self-care really became a buzzword a few years ago, financially, time-wise, I didn't have the finances or the time to be going to get my nails done or a massage. And even the bubble bath, it was like, are you kidding me? I have a 10-year-old that still needs to go to bed. I have a 2-year-old that's not sleeping. I don't have time for this.
Yeah.
And it's not relaxing when there's a kid banging on my door.
Yeah, exactly. There's so many factors. And then that's the thing with self-care. Oftentimes it becomes something else that we have to add onto our to-do list. So then when we're not doing it, we feel guilt.
Yeah.
Right. And then when we're in that self-preservation space, like, when I say self-preservation, for me, sometimes self-preservation is like reaching for the cookies instead of like the salad. Right. Yeah. Because that's what I need to do to make it through the day. Right. But there's a lot of like guilt and around that, right? It's like, oh my gosh, am I going to be here forever? Or like, this isn't doing the grief work. But sometimes we actually need the space to like allow ourselves permission to understand that we just need to get through the day, and not every day can we actually show up doing that work. And the holidays are one of those times where sometimes we really have to just do what we can.
100%. There are days, I have a chronic illness that requires me some days to have a nap. And that is the self-preservation I need, because if I don't have that nap, I'm not going to be able to make it through the next week, actually, because my chronic illness is one where if I don't take care of myself in the moment, it will come back tenfold later in the week when I'm down for not just a couple of hours, I'm down for maybe 2 or 3 days. So again, self-preservation through the holidays and through grief is as key to your journey through grief, because when we can take care of that, when we can kind of look at the self-preservation and figure out what we need today is going to help us 5 days from now.
Yeah, and honoring that space, right? Like you said, you have a chronic illness, as do I live with chronic pain. This is why you and I, like, we just see each other. Not that we want to see each other in pain, but it's so helpful to have like a partner who really understands not only the grief journey, but like what it means to actually live with chronic pain and illness. And parenting through all of those things. But yeah, like, you easily could say to yourself, guilt yourself into being like, oh, like, I need to show up, I need to do this for my family, instead of just allowing yourself the space to go, like, actually, I need a nap, because my family and I are not going to be able to get through the rest of the day, let alone the week, if I don't take the space.
Yeah. And as a parent of a living child, there are times where I don't make it to my living children's events or basketball games because I'm too tired, or I know that they're triggering, or maybe I'm just having a really rough grief day and I just don't need to be around people. That is okay. One thing I have learned parenting a teenager is I don't have to show up to every event, but I have to show up every day. So instead of focusing on an event, I like to focus on the day and what they need. So when I'm dealing with my grief, I look at showing up for my daughter, Emelina. When I show up for her and feel the grief and lean into the grief, then I'm honoring and I'm paying attention to her. When I push the grief aside, it's almost like I'm pushing her aside. And that's the way I look at it, so that it kind of keeps me accountable to not doing what I did for the first 5 years of grief, which was ignore all the pain and let it just sit and bubble and freak out over a bed not being made.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so what does, when we're talking about preservation, self-care through the holidays with grief, what does that actually look like for, like, let's say for somebody who's maybe newer in their grief journey, and this might be their first holiday season without their child? What does that look like, do you think?
For me, I think I would say it's okay to say no. It is okay to cancel at the last minute. Yourself is most important. Your grief, the way you're feeling is important. So and I mean, here in Alberta, we cannot see our families. So that might look different than if we could see our families. But maybe it is sitting in your bedroom with the door closed for a little bit to nap, to read, to whatever your body is feeling. Maybe that's just a big old cry. That is totally okay. And again, it's okay not to do your traditional dinner or your traditions if that's not what you're feeling. Every year for the last 9 years, we kind of go like this. Some years we do tradition and some years we don't. And for the first time in 9 years, we're actually having a traditional Christmas dinner on Christmas Day. I'm not making it because that's not my thing right now. So we ordered it in, but we're going to do something traditional. And it has taken us 9 years to be able to celebrate as a family in our home with a traditional meal. Normally we're like off the wall, but that's where I am this year. That doesn't mean I'll be there next year. And it doesn't mean I was there last year, but for me, that's where I am. So self-preservation really, I feel like it's listening to what your heart and your soul need.
Yeah. And I think that's the biggest thing, is like listening truly to what you're feeling versus what you're thinking. So like dropping down from like that intellectual space, because when we are in that intellectual space, that's where the guilt and the shoulds, like, oh, I should be doing this instead, or like, I'm weak for saying no, or like, this person's going to be disappointed. That's all coming from like your intellectual mind. But when you actually drop down from that space and more into your body, into like that feeling space, and let that guide you, I think that we can never go wrong, because then we're truly honoring like our soul's desires.
And it's uncomfortable, especially for a person like myself who is very structured and who always wants to do the best thing for everybody else and put everybody else's needs before my own. Really listening to my own emotions and my own thoughts and kind of where I am has been hard. But as soon as I've done it, I enjoy the season. I enjoy life. When I don't, I become very angry and very upset. And all of a sudden, nothing is enjoyable. Not for me, not for the people around me.
Totally. And so, I mean, COVID-19 is kind of creating some boundaries for us this holiday season, especially if you live in a place like we do in Alberta, where the COVID-19 restrictions are such that we are not allowed technically to see our families over the holidays. So that boundary's kind of been placed for us. But I think boundaries are a really important piece of both self-preservation, self-care, whichever way you find it. I think boundaries are an essential piece of kind of caring for your grieving heart through the holidays and beyond. So Danyelle, what are some boundaries that you place around your heart, particularly during the holidays? And of course, again, that might look different with COVID-19, or maybe not. I don't know.
So the boundaries change every year, because every year I am in a different place. So the boundary that I set this year is I did not want to cook. I did not want to bake. I did not want to be in the kitchen. And in the past, I found a lot of comfort in that, where I can bake something and give it to somebody, or I can feed my family. But I'm tired. My body is tired. My soul is tired. It has been a crazy 10 months and we haven't had a break. My family had expected to go away on a vacation in November. We didn't get that vacation. And so we haven't taken time to just be. So we're treating the holidays this year for us more of a quote vacation, where I'm not cooking Christmas Eve dinner. I'm not cooking Christmas dinner. We are ordering in from small restaurants here locally. We are going to use pre-made items, stuff that, you know, the Danyelle 10 years ago would have been like, are you kidding me? You're doing that. But the Danyelle today says, I want to enjoy this time with my family. I don't want to be stressed out about cooking or cleaning or any of those pieces. When 2 years ago, the boundary looked like we were going to spend Christmas and the holidays at home, and then we would visit with family before or after. So every year my boundaries change, and what I try to do, and it's part of my self-care, self-preservation kind of mixed together, is 2 weeks before the holidays, which was about last week, I take an internal temperature check to see where I am. How am I feeling? What do I want to do? What do I don't want to do? And this means that I might have said yes to an invitation at the beginning of December, but now I'm looking at it going, I don't think we want to do that. And we'll pull out of invitations if need be. And when I took that internal temperature this year, I was like, I really want to celebrate the holidays, but I want to be comfortable. I want to be able to spend my days in my pajamas and not be serving everybody else.
Yes.
So we looked for ways that we could incorporate that into the holidays. And I know by doing that and doing that internal check, I will be much happier through the holiday break than if I had just said, well, we're stuck at home, I guess I'm cooking.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. And I love that you said it changes every year. I think that is a big thing. I think people think that boundaries are like these things that are very rigid.
Yeah.
And they're not. They're actually meant to be flexible because our lives change, our needs change, our emotions, our feelings, all of those change. And so our boundaries need to be flexible to change with that. If we're keeping rigid boundaries, then we're actually not being I don't think we're being truthful to ourselves. So I really like that you said like it changes every single year. And one thing I want to say about boundaries too is that I think people have this notion that boundaries are something that like we place from like a place of anger or hatred towards other people. But boundaries are actually like deeply rooted in love. They are things that we place around ourselves and our families to keep that love sacred, to keep our space sacred, right? So they are never placed out of anger or to keep people out. That's not what boundaries are. It's about keeping what's in healthy, strong, resilient, empowered. And I think that that's like a big difference, because when I used to try to set boundaries, I would feel that way. I'd feel guilty and I'd be like, oh, I don't want to hurt people's feeling. But then when I started seeing it, that actually, no, this is the space, what I do to keep me safe and my family protected and nurtured, I really started to see it differently. And I was able to make those choices from a very different, like intentional space.
I always feel like if we're setting a boundary out of anger, there's probably something else there. So I have learned over the last, and I'm going to say last 5 years, is really to do temperature checks before I set the boundaries. When I wanted to close my day home, I did a temperature check to see why I wanted to do that. Was it just because I was tired? Or was it that I wasn't living out my dream? When it became clear I wasn't living out my dream, I took steps in order to get to that point. So it wasn't easy. It took time. It took 2 years, and there were people that were unhappy. But I made those decisions very clear of why. So I could have made the boundary that I was closing the day home right now because that was it. I was super angry, but really it was because I was tired and I wasn't living out what I wanted to be living. So my advice is always, if you're looking for boundaries, you're going to have to dig super deep to make the right boundaries at the right time.
Yeah, and I love how you keep saying temperature checks, because that really shows like you're checking in with yourself, not externally, right? And I think that's the biggest key. Boundaries should always be placed based on how you are feeling, not what you think you should do or what other people's opinions and things like that. That's where it gets really murky, like that temperature check of like, what is it that I want and why? What's the intention behind this too? I think is really, really important. I'm the same way as you, Danyelle, this year. I am tired. Like you said, when you said you were tired, your soul, I'm like, I said this last night to my sister that I'm like, I am just tired, like tired to the bone, like bone tired. It's been a year. It's been a challenging year, like, you know, globally, personally, very, very challenging. But I've got to say, it's been one of the most fulfilling, like personally fulfilling, professionally fulfilling years I've ever experienced. And that excites me. With that fulfillment, we've been working, you and I both know, we've been working so hard being in service that I have placed the same boundaries around my time. With this holiday season, normally I like to do all of the holiday things, but I'm same thing, taking this time off to just be like in my pajamas and do nothing. Like already this week, we're not even off, but I'm like, we're going to watch a holiday movie tonight. And like, instead of, you know, doing all the stuff, like we normally do a big baking day with my mom, which we did a baking day, but we like vastly reduced the amount of baking that we did. We did 2 cookies. Usually we do like 6 different cookies and we do like 12 different tins. I'm like, okay, there's 4 tins and we're going to make 2 types of cookies. And we had fun. We enjoyed it. It felt good. It went from like a full day production to like, we did it for a couple of hours. Everybody was happy. Nobody was fighting. And it just felt better.
I feel like you're bringing the joy back. We ordered a bunch of baking so that we would have some items in the home and to give to some of the people who are important to us here locally. And I said to my children, I am happy to bake on the holiday break, but we're not baking for 12 hours. I am happy to make 1 type of cookie or 2 types of cookie and for us to all do it. I don't want the pressure of it all. I want the joy back. I don't want the kind of the feeling that I've been feeling the last few years. Is it just something to check off? Okay, I did the baking. Now everybody has their gifts. Now I can move on. I really want to bring the joy back. I talked a lot in the last podcast about like the peace of the season, and I always go for the peace. This year, my goal is more to bring some of the joy, and joy in the little things, not the, oh, we got to go see these wonderful Christmas lights, or we had 500 people in our house. I mean, the joy of just like sitting in front of my fireplace with my kids, watching them do a puzzle or play a game, or just sitting and reading, something I love to do, but I have not done since March. So yeah. You're in a global pandemic. We can't go anywhere, but I have not read a single book.
Right.
Simply because we have been on this hamster wheel with the center of so many opportunities, so many wonderful things going on, so many people getting support, but it's tiring because it takes up every ounce of us. And by the time I'm finished working, I'm like, I just want to watch trashy TV and go to bed.
Yes, exactly. And that's what I mean though by the self-preservation, that is okay, right? I think that sometimes when we're like, we choose to numb out, I think we feel guilty because we're like, oh my goodness, we're numbing out, and technically self-care should be, you know, meditating instead. Yes, of course, meditation is great, but there are some days and there are some moments, and particularly holidays, grieving, pandemic, there are moments where we need to give ourselves permission to turn off.
Yeah.
Right? Like we all deserve that space to just say, we need to just do this for ourselves. And that brings me to like that joy, what you were saying. I was also having conversations with clients this week about gratitude, right? About how I love the concept of gratitude journaling, but I think what people do when we gratitude is that we always list like the same 3 things, and they're like the big things, like I'm grateful for my family, I'm grateful for my health, I'm grateful for whatever, my house, which are of course great things to be grateful for. But I think it's really important, especially in this season when things are feeling really heavy, really tiring, it's really important that we look for those small, seemingly small moments, specific things of gratitude. Like you mentioned, I am grateful today. Like, what today brought you that feeling of gratitude? Not like what you think you should be grateful for, but when you sat there reading your book in front of the fire and you felt that little like joy bubble up, that was a feeling. That is that moment to say, this was what I'm grateful for. For me, that's been watching Schitt's Creek. I've been binging watching Schitt's Creek with a hot chocolate every single night. It has been bringing me immense joy. And so on my gratitude list, that's very specifically what I write. Am I grateful for my kid? Absolutely, I'm grateful for my kid. But I look for those moments of like, really specifically, what am I grateful for my child about? What am I grateful for like Danyelle about, right? Today, everyone, Danyelle sent me a beautiful text. I was having a moment and right away, she just kind of grounded me. And those are what makes it on my gratitude list. Not just I'm grateful for Danyelle, I am, but it's those really specific moments where I know that feeling of joy is present in me.
And I think when you get specific, you're reminded. So I started gratitude journaling exactly the way you said. I'm grateful for my house. I'm grateful for my partner. And then I wasn't grateful for my partner one day because we were having a really tough day. And so as I'm writing, I'm grateful for my partner, I'm thinking to myself, I'm not grateful for him actually right now.
Yeah.
I actually don't like him right now.
Yeah.
And it made me think, what was I grateful for in that day? And it was like a warm blanket, a comfortable chair, time to, do my temperature check. And then the next day I was like, oh, I'm really grateful that my partner brought me a coffee at the right moment, or whatever that looked like. I could then be grateful for him. But I think we need to remember that just because we're writing a gratitude list doesn't mean what we were grateful for yesterday is what we're grateful for today.
Yes, and it should change.
And if we're grateful, why?
Yes.
Because anytime I don't look at the why and I'm like, I'm grateful for my house. Well, really, am I grateful for my house? Mm-hmm. I am, because of XYZ. Yeah. Not just I'm grateful for my house, because there's nothing tangible there, and it doesn't bring me joy. It doesn't bring me joy right now when it's a disaster.
Yeah, so, when we've been in our houses for 9 months, right? It's like, yes, we are grateful that we have a home, a safe home to live in, absolutely. But it needs to be a little bit more specific than that. That's what I recommend to people is let's get a little deeper, let's get a little bit more specific. So I think that's a really nice way, especially during the pandemic when we feel maybe there isn't a lot to be grateful for this year. That can really help you find the moments, the daily moments. Like at the beginning of all my client sessions, I always open follow-ups with moment of celebration. Clients some weeks will sit down and say, Aditi, don't even ask me, there's nothing to celebrate. And lo and behold, every client finds at least something small to celebrate. It's when we're looking for the smaller things is when we find them. And then we realize that those smaller things are the big things.
100%. And those big things is where we see the changes and 2 years ago, you could have told me to look for the small things and I would have given you the same answer. There's nothing small.
Yeah.
But when you start digging in, you figure out that there is, and those small things become big things, and those big things become life-changing.
Yes, exactly. So I think that is a good way to end this episode. So for everybody listening today, we hope that you have a gentle holiday season. We hope that you're able to recognize that you might be in moments of self-preservation during this holiday season, and that is okay. We hope that you find the grace to create those loving boundaries around yourself. And we hope that you find the simple and smaller specific gratitudes in this season. It's hard. But they're there if you look for them. And like Danyelle said, they become life-changing when you recognize them. We are very, very happy to have built the center to where it is in this very difficult year. I could not have done it without Danyelle. Danielle's always on my gratitude list, but very specifically. Her and her family are just amazing. And I hope, Danyelle, that you find the rest and relaxation and peace and joy that you are seeking this holiday season. And I'm so looking forward to 2021 and what is in store. And I'm just so very grateful to have you alongside for the ride.
Well, thank you. And Aditi, I feel the same way. I could not have made it through the last year because our year really started in January when we had a flood in our building.
Yeah.
So we have seen the gamut this year, and
Yeah.
I've been so grateful to have your ear, your messages, and really just know that working together, we are achieving such amazing things. I wish for you to have a gentle holiday season and for you to really take the opportunity to relax, because I know if I'm tired, you're as tired as I am. And
You're tired.
yeah, we need to recuperate and revive ourselves, because 2020 is going to,
2021.
2021 is going to start with a bang, I believe.
Yes.
I believe we've got a lot of amazing things in the works.
Yes. So everybody stay tuned for all of the things that we have in store. We hope that you get rest, find peace and joy and gratitude this holiday season. And we will be holding your babies close to our hearts as always. Have a good season, and we'll see you next year.
See you later.